Why is everything falling apart after our wedding? Uma asks in confusion. Welcome to Treeside-Tales, a home of beautiful African stories. Uma and John's wedding was the happiest day of their lives. The small but beautiful ceremony was filled with love, laughter, and the warmth of family and friends. Uma, dressed in a flowing white gown, looked radiant, and John, in his sharp suit, couldn't stop smiling. Among the many gifts they received, an envelope from an unknown guest stood out. It was thick with cash, a generous gift for the newlyweds. Later that evening, after the celebrations had ended, Uma and John sat together in their cozy new home. They opened the envelope and began counting the money. They laughed and joked, excited to use the cash to start their new life. But as they counted, Uma's hands paused. Among the crisp new notes was an old crumpled naira note. It was faded and looked as if it had passed through many hands over the years. Where did this come from? Uma asked, holding it up for John to see. John shrugged. Maybe whoever sent it didn't notice it. It's probably a mistake. I think so too, but this is a huge cash gift. Wow. I will expand my boutique with this money, and we would still have so much left. God bless whoever gave us this money, Uma said excitedly. Amen, my love. The anonymous giver will never lack, John added. Uma placed the old note in a drawer, thinking nothing of it. She and John continued counting the rest of the money, dreaming about their future. That night, Uma and John slept peacefully, still basking in the joy of their wedding day. But around midnight, Uma woke up with a start. Her heart raced as if she had been running, and her skin felt cold despite the warmth of the room. John, she whispered, shaking her husband awake. Did you hear that? Hear what? John mumbled, rubbing his eyes. It sounded like someone was whispering, Uma said, her voice trembling. John listened for a moment, but the house was silent except for the ticking clock. It's just your imagination, he said, pulling her close. Go back to sleep. Uma nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She eventually drifted off again, only to dream of an unfamiliar woman. The woman's face was blurry, but she held out her hands as if begging for something. Give it back, the woman said in a low, raspy voice. Give it back. Uma woke up sweating, her breath coming in gasps. She didn't tell John about the dream, thinking it was just her nerves. But the unease lingered, wrapping around her like a shadow. Within the next few weeks, their misfortunes started unfolding one after the other. John was a rising star at his company, praised for his hard work and innovative ideas. He was on track for a promotion, and his managers often spoke of his bright future. But less than a month after the wedding, everything began to fall apart. One morning, John was called into an urgent meeting. His boss, once warm and encouraging, now wore a cold, stern expression. John, we've noticed several irregularities in your recent work, his boss said, sliding a stack of papers across the table. The documents were riddled with errors, missing figures, incomplete data, and unexplained discrepancies. John stared at the papers in shock. He had triple-checked every detail before submission. Sir, this isn't possible, he said, his voice shaking. I didn't make these mistakes. His boss frowned. Whether you did or didn't, it's your responsibility. We can't ignore this. Despite John's protests, he was suspended and eventually fired. The humiliation was unbearable. Colleagues he once worked closely with avoided him, and rumors spread that he had been careless with company finances. John's reputation, built over years of dedication, crumbled overnight. Uma, on the other hand, had always dreamed of owning a boutique, and her dream had come true shortly before the wedding. Her shop was filled with vibrant fabrics, stylish clothing, and accessories that her customers loved. Even as her personal life spiraled into chaos, her boutique remained her last shred of hope, a small glimmer of normalcy in an otherwise dark time. But that hope didn't last long. One evening, Uma was closing up the boutique. The day had been quiet, with only a few customers. As she locked the doors, she paused to admire her shop through the glass. "At least this is still standing," she whispered to herself, clutching her bag tightly as she walked away. Later that night, while she and John sat together at home watching a TV program, the phone rang. Uma's heart jumped as she answered it. It was her neighbor from the market district, his voice frantic. "Uma, your boutique! There's a fire! You need to come now!" Uma's phone slipped from her hand, and for a moment, the world seemed to spin. She grabbed her keys, yelling for John, and they rushed to the boutique as fast as they could. When they arrived, Uma's heart shattered. Flames roared through her beloved boutique, the bright orange glow lighting up the night sky. Thick, black smoke billowed into the air, and the smell of burning fabric stung her nose. Firefighters were already on the scene, trying to control the blaze, but the fire was fierce, as though fueled by an unseen force. Uma ran toward the building, screaming, "No! My shop! Please, save it!" But John held her back, his arms wrapped tightly around her as she sobbed uncontrollably. The firefighters worked tirelessly, but by the time the flames were extinguished, the boutique was reduced to charred rubble. Shelves, fabrics, and years of hard work, all gone in a single night. As the smoke cleared, the firefighters approached Uma. "We're sorry," one of them said. "The fire spread too quickly. It's strange. It's almost like it started from the center of the shop and spread outward. Do you use any flammable chemicals in your boutique?" "No," Uma whispered, shaking her head. "Nothing like that." "Then it's a mystery," the firefighter said, scratching his head. "We'll investigate further, but sometimes these things happen without explanation." Uma and John exchanged a glance. No explanation? It didn't feel like an accident. It felt like something darker, something deliberate. Uma's mind raced back to the whispers in their home, her husband that just lost his job, now her boutique. "Why is everything falling apart after our wedding?" she asks John in confusion. "I don't really know what is happening, my dear," John replied, holding her close to his chest. The days that followed were filled with despair. Uma had no insurance to cover the loss, and rebuilding the boutique seemed impossible with their dwindling finances. She stayed in bed for days, her spirit crushed. "I've lost everything, John," she said one evening, her voice hollow. "Your job, and now my boutique. It feels like we're cursed." John sat beside her, his face pale and tired. "I don't know what's happening to us, Uma," he admitted. With John out of work, their finances quickly spiraled out of control. The savings they had carefully built before the wedding dwindled as bills piled up. Uma tried to manage their budget, cutting back on luxuries and even necessities. But it wasn't enough. John searched desperately for a new job, but every door seemed to slam shut in his face. Companies that once expressed interest in him suddenly withdrew their offers, citing vague reasons or mentioning negative feedback from his previous employer. Uma considered taking on small jobs, but her lack of experience in the workforce made it difficult. Each rejection chipped away at their hope, leaving them feeling helpless. As their finances crumbled, so did their health. Uma began suffering from migraines so intense, they left her bedridden for days. She developed an unshakable sense of being watched, even when she was alone. Sleep became elusive as nightmares plagued her nightly. Dark visions of faceless women crying and pointing accusingly at her. John, on the other hand, became prone to violent outbursts. Normally calm and patient, he found himself snapping at Uma and others for no reason. His temper alienated him from friends and family, leaving the couple increasingly isolated. Even worse, their home began to feel hostile. The whispers grew louder at night, soft at first, then rising to urgent commands. "Give it back! Return what is not yours!" The couple was too afraid to discuss what they heard, each secretly hoping it was just their imagination. Their troubles extended to their families, creating rifts that had never existed before. John's mother, once warm and loving toward Uma, began blaming her for her son's misfortunes. "You brought a curse into his life," she accused one afternoon, her voice sharp with anger. "His wife has brought bad luck to him and our family," his mother spat. "Since he married her, everything has fallen apart." John's mother said to her friend who came to visit her. The couple, already fragile from the strain of their troubles, began turning on each other. Arguments became a daily occurrence, with accusations flying between them. Their love, once unshakable, was beginning to crack under the weight of their misfortunes. Just as they thought things couldn't get worse, Uma discovered she was pregnant. For a brief moment, joy returned to their lives. They believed the baby was a sign that their fortunes were about to change. But the pregnancy was riddled with complications. Uma was constantly fatigued, plagued by strange pains doctors couldn't explain. One night, after another heated argument with John, she collapsed on the bathroom floor. At the hospital, they received the devastating news Uma had miscarried. The loss shattered them. Uma fell into a deep depression, blaming herself for the miscarriage. John, unable to process his own grief, withdrew emotionally. Their home became a silent battlefield, filled with unspoken pain and despair. Uma kept on having miscarriages each time she conceived, and the doctors could not even detect the cause of her miscarriages, as she was medically fit. One day, Uma was in the busy market, trying to buy fabrics for a small project. The market was noisy, with people bargaining, sellers shouting, and children running around. She was tired. Life had been hard lately. Nothing seemed to work, and her troubles were weighing her down. As she stopped at a stall to check some fabric, a loud voice called out behind her. "Madame! Madame!" She turned around and saw a madman standing behind her. His clothes were dirty, his hair wild, and his eyes sharp, almost too sharp for someone in his condition. He pointed straight at her. "Madame, give me some money, and I'll tell you what's happening in your life." Uma froze. She thought of walking away, but something about his voice made her stop. It wasn't like the other beggars in the market. He seemed so sure, almost as if he already knew her. "Please leave me alone," she said, turning back to the fabrics. "Don't walk away from the truth," the man called again, louder this time. "You want to know why your life is falling apart, don't you?" His words hit her like a blow. She hesitated, feeling the weight of his gaze. Against her better judgment, she reached into her bag, pulled out a small note and handed it to him. "Here," she said. "What do you want to tell me?" The madman took the money, his fingers shaking as he held it. Then, leaning closer, he whispered, "You received an old NAIRA note, didn't you?" Uma's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "That note didn't come to you by accident," the man said, his tone calm but chilling. "It came from someone you trust, a friend. That note is why everything in your life is going wrong. Your husband's job, your sleepless nights, your tears. It's all because of the note." Uma stared at him, stunned. How could he know? Her mind raced back to the old, crumpled NAIRA note she had found in the anonymous cash wedding gift. She had tucked it away in a drawer and forgotten about it. "You're lying," Uma said, shaking her head. The madman laughed, a hollow, eerie sound that sent chills down her spine. "Call your friend named Stella," he said. Ask her about the old NAIRA note. Ask her what she's done. Before Uma could say anything else, the madman walked away, laughing to himself. She watched him disappear into the crowd, her heart racing. She decided to rush home and call Stella, as she didn't go to the market with her phone. Her hands shook as she picked up her phone from the table. Immediately she opened her door and dialed Stella's number. When Stella answered, her voice was cheerful. Hey, Uma, what's up? Uma swallowed hard. Stella, I need to ask you something. Did you send us a cash gift on my wedding day? Because I remembered vividly you declined my invitation, saying that you couldn't come because you had a business trip to make. There was silence on the line. Then Stella's voice changed, becoming nervous. What do you mean? How could I have sent a cash gift without letting you know? I was even saying that I would come and see you soon to give you what I bought for you from the trip I made, and to make up for my absence from your wedding. So where is the cash gift coming from? Uma's chest tightened. She didn't believe Stella's response. Something wasn't right, and deep down she knew it. Stella's voice was shaky, and before Uma could press further, the line went dead. Stella had hung up. Uma stared at her phone, her heart pounding. Her best friend, the one person she trusted most, was hiding something. Why would Stella hang up on me? Does she know something about the note? Her mind was filled with confusion and fear. She thought about calling Stella back, but decided against it. Instead, she rushed back through the market, hoping to find the madman. She needed to know more, but when she reached the spot where she had seen him, he was gone. Uma asked some of the nearby vendors, but no one seemed to know anything about him. He's just one of those madmen, a fruit seller said dismissively. They come and go. Desperate and frustrated, Uma felt tears prick her eyes. She stood in the middle of the market, overwhelmed by the weight of everything happening in her life. The whispers in her house, John losing his job, her countless miscarriages, her struggle to get pregnant after her last miscarriage 4 months ago. It all seemed connected now, but she didn't know what to do. She hurried home, picked up the old NAIRA note from the drawer where she had kept it, and made her way to her church. The building was quiet, the afternoon sun streaming through the stained glass windows. She found her pastor, a kind and wise man named Pastor Nathaniel, sitting in his office. Uma, he said warmly, though his smile faded as he saw her tear-streaked face. What's wrong, my child? Uma placed the old NAIRA note on his desk. Pastor, I need help. My life has been falling apart since my wedding, and today a madman in the market told me this note is the reason for everything. He said it's cursed. Pastor Nathaniel's brow furrowed as he picked up the note. He examined it closely, then placed it down gently. Tell me everything, he said. Uma recounted everything. The anonymous wedding cash gift, which the madman is now connecting it to, had come from her best friend Stella, John losing his job, the strange whispers in their home, and the madman's cryptic words. As she spoke, Pastor Nathaniel listened intently, his face growing more serious. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. Uma, he said, curses are real, but they only have power if we allow them to. This note is tied to something dark. We need to pray, but first we must understand its origin. But how? Uma asked. Stella won't tell me anything. She hung up on me when I asked if she was the anonymous sender. Pastor Nathaniel nodded thoughtfully. Then we pray for wisdom and revelation. God will expose the truth. But Uma, be prepared. The truth may be harder to face than you expect. Pastor Nathaniel led Uma to the altar, where they knelt together. He began to pray, his voice strong and steady, calling on God to reveal the secrets hidden in the cursed note and to break its hold on Uma's life. As he prayed, Uma closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. She felt a strange heaviness lift from her chest, replaced by a flicker of hope. But as Pastor Nathaniel continued, something unexpected happened. The room grew cold. A gust of wind swept through the church, rustling papers and extinguishing a nearby candle. Uma opened her eyes in fear, but Pastor Nathaniel's voice grew louder, commanding whatever force was present to leave. "The Lord rebukes you," he declared, his words echoing through the church. The wind subsided, and a deep silence filled the room. Uma's heart pounded as she looked at Pastor Nathaniel, who was now holding the note again. His face was pale, his eyes filled with concern. "The curse on this note is strong," he said quietly. "It is tied to betrayal, pain, and death. Someone close to you deliberately gave this to you, knowing what it would do." Uma's breath caught in her throat. "Stella," she whispered. "It has to be Stella, according to what the madman said. She is very close to me, though she couldn't make it to my wedding because of her business trip." Pastor Nathaniel nodded. "You need to confront her. We will pray for strength and wisdom." After the prayer, Pastor Nathaniel told her to go home and call Stella back. "This time around, you have to demand for the truth. She will confess. The Holy Spirit is already in charge." Uma went back home, staring at her phone. Her heart was pounding. The madman's words echoed in her mind. "Call your best friend and ask her about the old NAIRA note." At the same time, Pastor Nathaniel's words still echoed in her head. "You need to confront her." She dialed Stella's number again. It rang several times before Stella picked up. "Why are you disturbing me, madam?" Stella said angrily, as she picked up the phone. Uma didn't waste time. "Stella, I need to know the truth," she said firmly. "Were you the one that sent us that envelope filled with cash and one old NAIRA note?" "Stella, were you the one?" Uma asked, angrily, as she was already losing her patience. There was silence on the other end of the line. Uma's chest tightened as she waited. Finally, Stella spoke, but her voice was sharp. "Yes, I was the one that sent the envelope, and so what? It's just money, Uma. Why are you making such a big deal?" Uma's anger flared. "Don't lie to me, Stella. A madman told me that the note is cursed. My life has fallen apart since I received it. Tell me the truth, did you know?" Another long silence. Then Stella sighed, and her tone changed. It became colder, more sinister. "Fine," Stella said. "Yes, I gave it to you. And yes, I knew it was cursed." Uma gasped, her blood running cold. "You knew? Why would you do that to me? I thought you were my friend." Stella laughed, but it wasn't the warm laugh Uma knew. It was mocking and cruel. "Friend? Do you know how long I've been watching you live your perfect little life while mine has been a mess? I've suffered for years because of that note, and I finally had a way to get rid of it." Uma's voice trembled. "You ruined my life on purpose?" "Yes," Stella said flatly. "I wanted you to feel what I've felt all these years. Your husband's job, your boutique, your miscarriages, your tears, your sleepless nights. It's all because of me. Let's see how long your happy marriage lasts." Uma couldn't believe what she was hearing. Tears rolled down her cheeks as her hands shook. "How could you do this to me? I trusted you. I ignorantly called to tell you everything I was passing through, and you pretended to care. You are my best friend. How could you do this to me, Stella?" Stella laughed again, cold and heartless. "You'll figure it out, Uma. If you survive." Before Uma could respond, Stella hung up. Uma sat frozen, her phone still in her hand. Her best friend, someone she had loved and trusted, had betrayed her. Her chest felt tight, and she struggled to breathe. The whispers began again, faint but relentless. "Return it. Return it." She looked at the cursed note lying on the table in front of her. It no longer looked like just a piece of old money. It seemed alive, heavy with something dark and evil. She grabbed the note and stuffed it into her bag. There was only one person who could help now, Pastor Nathaniel. Uma rushed to the church, her heart pounding. When she arrived, Pastor Nathaniel was waiting for her. "Uma," he said calmly, "did you find out the truth?" "Yes," she whispered, holding out the note. "Stella gave it to me on purpose. She knew it was cursed." Pastor Nathaniel nodded, his face serious. "The truth has come out, and now we must pray to break this curse." Years before Uma's wedding, Stella, a young shop assistant, worked for Mama Kemi, a hard-working woman who had built her fabric shop from nothing. Mama Kemi's most treasured possession was an old Naira note, the first profit from her business, which symbolized her struggle and resilience. She often shared its story with her children, expressing its deep emotional value. One day, Stella, struggling with her own life and envious of Mama Kemi's stability, discovered the note hidden in a leather pouch. Desperation drove her to steal it, along with other cash, leaving a resignation letter behind. The theft devastated Mama Kemi, not just financially but emotionally, as the note represented her life's journey. In her grief, she cursed the thief, vowing they would never find peace until the note returned. Unaware of the curse, Stella moved to the city, hoping to start afresh. However, misfortune plagued her, failed businesses, broken relationships, and bad luck. She eventually consulted a native doctor after suspecting supernatural interference. The native doctor revealed the note carried Mama Kemi's pain and betrayal, transformed into a curse. Stella's misfortunes stemmed from this act of betrayal. The native doctor explained Stella had two choices: return the note to Mama Kemi or knowingly pass the curse to someone else. Overwhelmed by guilt and fear, Stella struggled to decide. Haunted by the cursed note in her drawer, she grappled with whether to confess and seek forgiveness, or continue carrying the burden of her actions. Then came Uma's wedding, a perfect opportunity to pass the curse to Uma. She never really liked Uma, so why not make her life miserable? Back to their friendship memories. Stella had always been the center of attention, the girl everyone admired. In school, boys flocked to her, eager to gain her favor, while Uma stood quietly in the background, her kindness often overlooked. Stella knew Uma admired her, and she pretended to cherish their friendship. But deep down, Stella resented Uma's quiet strength and unassuming beauty. When they grew older, Stella's charm began to fade. Her opportunities dwindled, and her reckless choices left her with nothing but bitterness. Meanwhile, Uma blossomed into the kind of woman Stella had always feared she would become: respected, loved, and now married to a man who adored her. Stella couldn't hide her envy. Watching Uma walk down the aisle with John, a man so devoted and kind, made Stella's stomach churn. Why should Uma, the shy girl no one noticed, have the perfect life? Why should she find the happiness Stella had spent years chasing but never caught? When she discovered that the old note carried a curse, Stella's resentment turned into a twisted opportunity. She had clung to the cursed note, too afraid to throw it away. But when Uma's wedding day approached, a cruel idea took root in her mind. As Stella prepared Uma's wedding gift, she stared at the old note, tucked among crisp new bills. Her lips curled into a bitter smile. If she couldn't have a happy life, why should Uma? She placed the cursed note into the envelope and sealed it tightly. "Let's see how far your marriage lasts," she whispered, her voice laced with malice. For the first time in years, Stella felt powerful, as though she had finally taken control of her misfortune by passing it on to someone else. For Stella, this was her moment of satisfaction. She imagined Uma's perfect life crumbling piece by piece, her joy replaced by the same despair Stella had endured for years. The thought filled her with a twisted sense of justice. Inside the church, Pastor Nathaniel gathered a few other prayer leaders. Uma sat in the middle, clutching her Bible. The old NAIRA note was placed on a small table before them. The pastor began praying, his voice strong and steady. The others joined in, their words rising in unison as they called on God to free Uma and her family from the curse. At first, the air was calm, but as the prayers grew louder, the room grew cold. The candles flickered, and a low, eerie sound filled the church. Uma shivered, fear gripping her heart. "Do not be afraid," Pastor Nathaniel said, his voice firm. "This curse will not win." The low sound grew into a loud, piercing wail. The old NAIRA note trembled on the table, as if something inside it was fighting back. Uma clutched her Bible tighter, tears streaming down her face. "In the name of Jesus," Pastor Nathaniel shouted, "we command this curse to be broken. We cast and bind every evil curse surrounding this NAIRA note in the mighty name of Jesus." The wailing grew louder, shaking the room. The note began to smolder, smoke rising from its edges. Uma shut her eyes tightly, whispering her own prayers. Suddenly, the smoke formed into the shape of a woman, shadowy, with her hands outstretched. "Return it!" the shadowy figure wailed, her voice filled with pain. "Return what was stolen!" Pastor Nathaniel stood firm, pointing at the figure. "You have no power here. Leave this woman and her family alone. Your justice will be done, but your curse ends today." With one final scream, the figure dissolved into the smoke, and the old NAIRA note burst into flames, burning to ash. The air grew still, and the church was silent once more. Uma collapsed to her knees, overwhelmed with relief. Pastor Nathaniel placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "It is done," he said softly. "The curse is broken." Uma wiped her tears, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. But deep inside, anger and sadness still lingered. Stella's betrayal had left scars that would take time to heal. For now, though, Uma was free, and she would fight to rebuild her life with John. As she left the church, Uma made a silent vow. She would never allow darkness to control her life again. And as for Stella, Uma knew that justice, true justice, was waiting for her. After her cruel confession to Uma, Stella thought she had won. She believed that by passing the cursed NAIRA note to Uma, her life would finally turn around. She waited for good fortune to come, for the heavy cloud of failure and bad luck that had followed her for years to disappear. One night, as Stella lay in bed, tossing and turning, she felt a heavy weight settle on her chest. She opened her eyes, gasping for air, and saw a shadowy figure standing at the foot of her bed. It was the same womanly form that had appeared in the church to Uma, a blurred, smoky outline of a woman with her hands outstretched. "Return it!" the figure hissed, her voice echoing through the room. "You stole from me! You cannot run!" Stella screamed, scrambling out of bed, but the figure followed her. Every corner she turned, every room she entered, the spirit was there, her presence dark and suffocating. "I gave it away!" Stella cried, her voice trembling. "I don't have it anymore!" The figure's voice grew louder, angrier. "You cursed her! You cursed your friend! Justice will find you!" Stella fell to her knees, sobbing. "I didn't know it would come to this. Please leave me alone." But the spirit did not leave. The next morning, Stella tried to pretend everything was normal, but she was far from okay. She didn't leave her apartment, terrified that the spirit would follow her into the streets. She stopped eating, her once vibrant figure now gaunt and frail. Her skin turned pale, her eyes hollow, haunted by the things she saw in the shadows. Her family tried to intervene, but Stella pushed them away. "You don't understand," she said, her voice shaky. "Something is after me. I can't escape it." As days turned into weeks, Stella became a shadow of herself. She rarely left her apartment, consumed by guilt and fear. The spirit visited her every night, its demands growing louder and more relentless. Return what you stole. Face justice. Your betrayal will destroy you. The torment pushed Stella to the brink. One stormy night, unable to take it anymore, she scribbled a letter and placed it on her dining table. In it, she confessed everything: the theft, the cursed note, and her betrayal of Uma. To Uma, she wrote, her hands trembling. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know the truth. I was jealous of you. I wanted your life to fall apart because I hated how easy you made happiness look. I didn't realize that by trying to destroy you, I would destroy myself. I hope you find peace, because I would never find peace, even in death. Please forgive me, Uma, my best friend. Goodbye. The next morning, Stella's body was found in her apartment. She had taken her own life, her face frozen in an expression of terror. The neighbors said they heard her screaming through the night, but no one dared to enter. Uma received Stella's letter a few days later, delivered by one of Stella's family members. She sat in silence as she read the words, tears streaming down her face. Stella's betrayal had nearly destroyed her life, but the letter made Uma realize that Stella's jealousy and guilt had consumed her long before the curse ever reached Uma's home. I forgive you, Uma whispered, clutching the letter. But I pray you find the peace you couldn't find in life. With Stella's death, the whispers in Uma's home stopped. The shadows no longer moved, and the air felt lighter. Uma and John slowly rebuilt their lives, their love stronger than ever. Moral of this story to intending couples: the importance of praying before opening a wedding gift. A wedding is a sacred union, celebrated with love and joy, and gifts from family and friends often symbolize blessings for the couple's future. However, not all gifts come with good intentions. Some may unknowingly carry negative energy, jealousy, or even curses tied to the giver's emotions or actions. Praying before opening wedding gifts is a powerful way to invite God's protection and guidance into the process. It allows the couple to dedicate their union to God and seek His covering over every aspect of their lives, including the gifts they receive. A simple prayer can act as a spiritual shield, breaking any hidden negativity or ill will attached to the gift before it enters the home. Praying before opening wedding gifts is a meaningful act of faith, inviting divine protection and ensuring the marriage begins on a foundation of love, peace, and spiritual security. Thank you for watching. Remember to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe.